Now to today's important topic, the 1967 riots. Very strangely, 50 years after these riots took place in Hong Kong, there is still a cloud of uncertainty over what exactly happened then, for most of us at least. And there seems to be some kind of taboo, or as Cheong was telling me, it is still a sensitive issue. We know for sure that there were dramatic events that left 51 people dead, more than 800 wounded, and close to 5,000 arrested. But what was it exactly? Some leftists hoping to spread the Cultural Revolution to the British colony, an attempted coup to take over the colonial government, or just the expression of deep social issues in Hong Kong society? And then, of course, what traces has it left in society today? To help us see through this event, we're very lucky and honored to have two of the most knowledgeable Hong Kongers on this matter, Cheong and Cheung. And I should also mention that we try to invite some other people like Ching, who played a significant role at the time, but unfortunately declined. And I would also like to mention two other events that the FCC is hosting in relation with this issue. First, there is an exhibition downstairs of pictures and reports of the events at the time. Of course, it's not a complete explanation, but it shows opposite sides. And have a look if you haven't yet. And second, we will screen the documentary, The Vanished Archives, by Connie Lowe, on the 6th of June. It was not part of all the events I announced because it's a bit later. So that will be an evening screening, and Connie Lowe will be there to take questions after the movie. So now let me introduce Cheong, who has a long career in journalism. He's often here. We're always delighted to have him, specializing in political, military, and diplomatic news in the Greater China area. And Cheong has also had the very harsh and unfortunate experience of spending 3 years in a Chinese jail after being wrongly accused of spying for Taiwan. And we also have Cheung, who is currently with Ming Pao after many different postings in Hong Kong media, and who published first a story of the 67 riots in 2000, and then Hong Kong's Watershed, the 67 riots, first in 2009, and then the Chinese edition 3 years later. So please join me in welcoming our two guests. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming to this FCC luncheon on the 50th anniversary of the 1967 riots. I've planned some brief PowerPoints to assist my speaking. First of all, it's interesting that, as mentioned by Florence, that 50 years on, the 1967 riots seems to be still alive in my memory for 5 or 6 years or even 10 years. This chapter of Hong Kong history appear on news page. For example, in 2001, when Yuan Kong, the struggle committee director, was awarded a Grand Bohemia Medal, it sparked an outcry. And closer to the date, 2 weeks ago, a group of leftists jailed during the disturbances went to a grave sweeping activity in Watershed in Fanling, and they call their what they call comrades who died during the disturbances, the riots, as martyrs or national heroes. And the views were also echoed by Federation of Trade Unions vice chairman, which often raised the question of whether the moment of vindication is coming, which I don't think it will happen. According to my objective judgment, I will later on elaborate. First of all, to make it simple, I would like to point out a simple fact that the nature of the 1967 riots, what it was and was not. For me, there is some argument over the years, in recent years, that it was sparked by social injustice, social ills in the 1960s, which, as a matter of fact, I don't deny that there are some problems, like a lack of protection of labor rights, lack of education opportunities. You won't believe that in the middle of 1960s, I think only around 10% of primary school is correct. Primary school leavers can enter into secondary schools subsidized by the government. Nowadays, I think more than 20% of secondary school leavers can enter into universities. Actually, those were the days. But I want to set the record straight that the main reason, the main causes of the 1967 riots were still the outbreak of Cultural Revolution in mainland China in 1966. Without that Cultural Revolution inspiring the Hong Kong leftists, there won't be such a large-scale, violent, anti-British disturbances in Hong Kong. And what is interesting that in 1966, 1 year before the 1967 riots, actually there was a Star Ferry riot sparked up by a Star Ferry fare increase from Central to Tsim Sha Tsui for 5 cents. 5 cents. A young man staged a hunger strike, and then the trouble came. There are some arson attack, burning of cars in Elephant Road. But it was very funny and interesting that at that time, Wen Hui Pao, Ta Kung Pao, those leftist newspaper side with the colonial government in supporting the suppression of the disturbances. But 1 year later, they changed the sense, calling it a national oppression by the colonial government. The crux is, in 1967, when the labor dispute in Sampo Gong, the trigger point, the immediate trigger of the 67 riots happened. In mainland China, Cultural Revolution already broke out. So that's the difference. So I firmly believe that we shouldn't over-exaggerate the rate of social problems in Hong Kong in explaining the outbreak of the riots. We know that after the labor dispute in Sampo Kong in 1967, later on the leftist camp resort to some non-conventional means like general strike, even food strike. That means no more sale of food, vegetables in wet markets or so, but still fail to bring the colonial governments to Riots. So they resort to some excessive means like planting of bombs, but it further alienates the general public. So eventually they fail. And this newspaper clipping is from Ming Pao, 1978. It shows Zhou Enlai, the Chinese premier, told the NCNA, the new China News Agency, that no more planting of bombs in streets. And the vice deputy director of NCNA, which is now the liaison office, sent a message to the leftists that it was a mistake. It was the 1967 riots was a mistake. That's why it explains why 50 years on, Beijing authorities seldom mention the incident publicly in a positive tone, because it sounds quite embarrassing for Beijing to affirm it publicly, because the 1967 disturbances was closely related to the Cultural Revolution, which itself was disapproved by the Communist Party. But having said that, I would like to cite this interesting paragraph. Guess who say this? These young people are moved by high ideals. They are angry at what they regard as an unhealthy community. And Stanley Pearsons offers clear evidence that some members of the community are not willing to live by bread alone. You can't believe that. Who wrote this? It was written by Cambridge University students who served as a summer intern in a famous magazine, which unfortunately closed, where Emily once served, Far Eastern Economic Review. The Cambridge University student is called Andrew Lee, Kok Lung, the former Chief Justice. He was assigned to interview a dozen young leftist prisoners in Stanley Prison to find out why they joined the riots. For example, like disturbing anti-British leaflets. And one of the young prisoners interviewed was Cheong, who later on became the chief editor of Ta Kung Pao, and then in year 2007, Secretary for Home Affairs. It shows clearly that the young man, Andrew Lee, was quite sympathetic with those young leftist anti-British sentiment, which he agreed their anger was justified. Last month, when I planned a package to mark the 50th anniversary of the riots for Ming Pao, I especially interviewed Mr. Andrew Lee, in which he recollects his encounter with Cheong Tat-sing. And to this date, he still agree that Cheong Tat-sing and others' grievances are reasonable. And he also agreed that the society can't just see making money as the sole objective. And the society also requires justice. And yeah, if you don't know when and who write these sentences, you may feel that this also applies to some young activists today. Yeah, and when I write about book on the riots and pen the packages to mark the anniversary of the riots, I often feel the need to connect history to status quo. Actually, the 1967 riots is not a dead chapter of Hong Kong history. Is a lively part of Hong Kong history. This is the situation in the Star Ferry Pier in Tsim Sha Tsui. You see, it was empty without any buses staying. It was actually it was a bus terminal which is still operating today. Why? It's because of the result of the general strike by the leftist camp in 1967. So not many buses are traveling around or staying here. This is what is today. And you know why I saw this picture of a minibus? It is because maybe thanks to the 1967 riots, if there is no such event, we may not have this minibus today. The reason is because there are quite a substantial number of bus drivers joined the general strike, causing big trouble for continuation of bus services. So after the riots, the colonial government learned a lesson. So they feel they can't completely rely on public bus company. So they introduced this kind of flexible services. Yeah. I think in the early 1970s, it's not that way, but maybe some seven-seater van to taking some people. Yeah. But now, so later on, become a minibus. So maybe I need to stop here to make the way for Mr. Ching.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone here, ladies and gentlemen, to give me a chance to share my views on these very traumatic events in the history of Hong Kong. Gary pioneered the research into this 1967 riot, and obviously he's an authority on this in this area. And his verdict on this was that it was because of the importation of the Cultural Revolution into Hong Kong that caused this upheaval. Now, I want to take up from what he left is whether this event still have lingering effects until now. Why is it relevant to discuss the 1967, 50 years afterwards? Because, first of all, there is a sustained effort to rewrite history. And this is very important. And the second relevance is that those who launched the riot 50 years ago are now in power. So how are they going to impact on present-day Hong Kong politics? The third point, which I think is even more important, is that now that in mainland China, there's a phenomena called subcultural revolution, which I'll define later. Now, 50 years ago, when the Cultural Revolution spilled over to Hong Kong, we have this 1967 riot. If the subcultural revolution now affecting China is going to spill over to Hong Kong again, who will be there to resist it? Now, I think this is a very pertinent question that everyone should bear in mind. Now, first of all, let me go back to this whitewashing, attempts to whitewash history. Gary has mentioned that a week ago, a number of people went to Fanling to worship, to mourn the death of 16 leftist workers killed during the riot. Now, this is a picture of their mourning activities. The one in white shirt, the one in the middle is the organizer of this event, and the one standing next to him in blue shirt is the representative of the Federation of Trade Union, which for the first time in 50 years joined their memorial activities. Now, this is the leader of that event. And when he was paying service to the deafs, he reiterated that the deafs were national heroes, they were patriotic martyrs and not mobs, that the 1967 riot was patriotic and righteous in nature, because it fought against imperialist suppression and capitalist exploitation, and that the Hong Kong society should accord them with proper respect and honor. Now, I think this is a big attempt to reverse the verdict passed by Beijing on the 1967 riot. Just now, Gary has shown a slide of a newspaper report that Beijing has admitted that the riot was wrong. And in fact, in 1978, there was a national conference on Hong Kong and Macau in which Liao Chenzhi, then the director of the Hong Kong and Macau office, ruled categorically that the 1967 riot was wrong. And then you have the 1981 resolution on history passed by the CCP Central Committee denouncing the Cultural Revolution, 100% negating the Cultural Revolution, and of course by extension the riot, since the riot is an extension of the Cultural Revolution into Hong Kong. And what is more important is the 1997 memoir by the then vice director of the Hong Kong and Macau office, Mr. Li Ho, in his memoir, which said that the 1967 riot is the third and most serious leftist mistake committed by the local communists. So as far as the central government is concerned, it's very clear that the riot was wrong. So why this call for according them with respect and honor? Unfortunately, soon after the handover, the SAR government took the initiative to reverse the verdict. And that was represented by the 2001 Grand Bohemian Medal awarded to Mr. Yang Guang, who is the iconic figure of the 1967 riot. Worse still, he awarded a Gold Bohemian Award to He Zhuoji. Now, what is the political implication? He Zhuoji is the boss of the commercial radio whose broadcaster, Mr. Lam Ben, was burned alive to death. So when you award the topmost honor to the organizer of the riot, and yet a secondary honor to the opposer of the riot, you are sent, what kind of political message you send to Hong Kong people? So I think after the SAR government took the lead to rewrite history, you have all sorts of attempts to rewrite history. Culminating in several years ago when two DAB legislators openly denied the killing of Lam Ben has anything to do with the leftist community. And then in 2012, the 67 group, which was the group that organizing all these memorial activities, for the first time was invited by the Central Liaison Office to take part in the anti-OC rally. They are very excited that finally the central government would listen to them. And of course, you know that the police tried to delete some key facts from their website. And then the memorial service, this time was for the first time joined by the Federation of Trade Union people and also the National People's Congress delegates. And the National People's Congress delegate, Mr. Ng Liang Sing, disclosed that he had asked the government, the central government, to reverse the verdict on the 67 riots. Now, given all these attempts to rewrite history, I think the Hong Kong society need to stand firm against such move to whitewash history. Now, why such an attempt? I think there are two factors. The local factor is attributable to the fact that those who started the riot 50 years ago were in power now. And then there's also a China factor, the emergence of a phenomena called subcultural revolution. Now, what does this mean? I'll go back to that later. Now, the rioters are in power now, and I would characterize this the several characteristics of this of those who are in power now, the leftists, given my understanding of them. First of all, blind patriotism. They are self-styled patriots in the strictest narrow sense of the word, and not even Hong Kong people thought of them as being too narrow. Even the central government thought that they are too narrow. Now, this four Chinese character, 一左二窄, meaning was not my own invention. It was, in fact, the central government's assessment of the left-wing community here. They are too extremists. 一左 means too extremist, and 二窄 means too narrow. Now, this was carried by in Mr. Hui Jiatun, the Xu Jiatun's memoir, recalling that when he was sent to Hong Kong in 1983, the central government told him that the community, the left-wing community in Hong Kong, are just too narrow. And they are hypersensitive in class struggles. They will relate everything to class struggle. And they have innate hatred against the British and the Americans. And they are highly suspicious of everyone not belonging to their group. And they are very benighted to the extent of being anti-social and anti-progress. I can cite you a number of examples showing how benighted they are. Now, these are the characteristics of people running Hong Kong now. Small wonder that we saw a deteriorating governance in Hong Kong. Now, the subcultural revolution. Now, what is subcultural revolution? Subcultural revolution is a term coined by mainland Chinese scholar Mr. Lu Liangbiao, denoting a political phenomena that resembled to the political atmosphere during the Cultural Revolution, though not to the same extent. So he used sub, the prefix sub, to denote this, to denote a political atmosphere very similar to the Cultural Revolution. Now, how does this subcultural revolution come about? It's all because of Xi Jinping's policy in the last 4 years. Now, here I list a number of Xi's policy that led to this rise of this subcultural revolution phenomena. If you are interested, I can elaborate it more if we have time. Now, is this subcultural revolution going to affect Hong Kong? Both yes and no, depending on how we view it. But my question is, 50 years ago, when the Cultural Revolution spilled over to Hong Kong, those in power were the British, and they firmly resisted it. Now, if the subcultural revolution is going to spill over to Hong Kong again, those in power now were exactly the same group of people who tried to import the Cultural Revolution into Hong Kong 50 years ago. Will they resist it as firmly as the British did, or will they embrace it? Now, this is a big, big question for Hong Kong. Now, I want to draw your attention to these 5 questions, which I think is important in figuring out the future of Hong Kong. The first question is, what is the biggest difference in the basic laws of both Hong Kong and Macau? Now let me tell you what, the biggest difference is that in Hong Kong's basic law, the central government promised us universal suffrage, but not in Macau. Why? Now, the root cause goes back to half a century ago, to the two riots, both in Macau and in Hong Kong. For time's sake, I'll leave it to a later stage when if you care to raise this issue. The second question is, why is there an independence movement in Hong Kong and not in Macau? At least, I mean, not yet. Again, the root goes back to 50 years ago. Now, the third question I would like to ask is, what if the local communists won 50 years ago? I think Macau provides a very good reflection of how Hong Kong would become if the British caved in 50 years ago. Why is there a deteriorating governance since 1997? I think I've given you the answer. Because after the handover, those in power were those people who are both very narrow-minded and extremist. The previous slide tells you, go a long way to explaining why we have experienced this deteriorating governance. And the final question I would ask everyone to bear in mind. What if another round of movement similar to the Cultural Revolution or the subcultural revolution were to spill over to Hong Kong again? Who will be there to resist it? I think this is a very important question facing every people who call Hong Kong home. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to the two.
Hi, I'm To Han Chi. I'm a reporter with MLEX. Now, I'm a Singaporean. So as a Singaporean, I would like to ask these two gentlemen, how do you compare the Singapore experience to the Hong Kong experience? Because Singapore had pro-communist riots in the 50s and the 60s, but these people who led the riots had been jailed for many years in Singapore, or they lived and died as nobodies in Singapore, or they fled outside of Singapore. Whereas in contrast, in Hong Kong, some of the people who were involved in the riots are now in the government leadership in Hong Kong.
Thank you. Who wants to take it? Gary or Ching?
Yes, maybe I'll say a few words. Actually, I have some reservation about the statement that those involved in the 1967 riots in Hong Kong were now in position in power. The only exception may be Cheong, who was one secretary for Home Affairs and also formerly an advisor of Central Policy Unit. For the vast majority of those jailed, imprisoned during the riots 50 years ago, most of them, according to my study, are mainly low-tier members of leftist trade unions, leftist school, which miserably end up in quite miserable life after their jail term. That's my observation, so I am not too. I'm still a bit optimistic that the day of vindication, reckoning, so-called reckoning, settling old score may not come or will not come because according to my understanding, Beijing officials, they are paying some tricks towards these people that They may, for example, they may organize some banquets, treating them. Oh, hey, hey, you are patriots, so good, loving the country. But they won't, they won't sincerely offer them some top position in the government, or even approve that chapter of history publicly, because as I mentioned over there, that since the 1967 riots were closely related or sparked by the Cultural Revolution, which officially was disapproved by the Communist Party according to the communique in 1981 resolution.
Thank you. Cheong, do you want to add something?
First of all, let me say a few words about Gary's disagreement. He said that he denied that those rioters are in power now. Of course, if you take a head count, those who are actively throwing bombs all around, they are not in power now. But what I mean, those in power, I mean the entire left-wing community as a whole. They are now in power. If you look at the legislator, you see the DAB guy, this Zhou Haoding, he's so stupid in even trying to be a slave to CY Leung, and he performs so stupidly. These are the types of people who are in power now. You can't deny that the entire left-wing community is in the position of power. If you look at the statutory organizations, all the statutory organizations, the leaders of the statutory organizations are almost handpicked or appointed by the liaison office. So you can't deny that as a political group, they are in power now. Okay, now back to Shi Tang's question. I think he raised a very important question. I remember in Li Guangyao's memoir, he said that Singapore is successful because he suppressed the communists. Now, if you compare Hong Kong's experience to Macau, in Macau, the Portuguese government caved in readily to pressure from communists. And therefore, Macau will never grow into a major big city. Fortunately, in Hong Kong, 50 years ago, the British government put up strong resistance against the riots, and therefore Hong Kong get this opportunity to develop. In this regard, Hong Kong's experience is quite similar to Singapore's. By getting rid of the communists, then we have the chance to develop.
Thank you. Sorry, we're running a bit late, so we'll take one or two questions. I ask you to go very fast. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. David Hodson. If I can make a comment, I actually participated in the 67 riots. I was in the police at the time. I was playing for the home team, needless to say. A couple of prejudices which were dispelled in 67. Firstly, the view was that Cantonese were totally useless as police officers because they owed their loyalty to family and clan. That view was completely dispelled in 67. They're under great pressure, they were extremely loyal, and the expatriate emergency units made up of people from Shantung and Pakistan were diluted and were unnecessary. The second prejudice was that China just had to sneeze and we'd all fall down. China does not sneeze. Factions in China sneeze. So when there's some sneezing going on, you simply have to work out which is the faction and who is sneezing. we associated ourselves closely with Chou En-lai and anything that he promoted. So it doesn't matter what they did, we did not interfere with the NCNA, we did not interfere with the Bank of China. On the border, the situation was more difficult and more complicated and more tense. Police facilities there were surrounded by anti-personnel mines, and we were very nervous of inadvertently getting into a conflict with the PLA. We did not want to do that. The amusing, or the irony of it all was that you'll no doubt remember this propaganda, which was on the displayed. Who's responsible for these atrocities? Well, we were. But what was the atrocity? A few people hit over the head with batons. Meanwhile, factions in China were killing people by the 100,000, maybe millions in the Cultural Revolution. On the other hand, the other faction, the British government, came out with this: Guardians of the People, UK propaganda. But what did UK do? They sacked the Commissioner of Police for being too soft. Most people didn't recognize this. It was kept a closely guarded state secret for 30 years that he had actually been sacked. Strange old world.
Thank you very much. We'll squeeze one more question. Sorry about that. Okay, Ed here.
Yeah, Ed Chin with the FCC Press Freedom Committee. I want to ask Mr. Ching, now, fast forward 50 years from 1967. President Xi Jinping probably will come to Hong Kong on July 1st. Now, LegCo and the government is full of, like you say, stupid people like Holden Chow. How can we let the paramount leader know the vexation that we have as Hong Kongers? Do you think it's possible to have like some sort of a town hall meeting, just like in the US in the presidential debate, instead of like 5 years ago when Wu Jintao came to Hong Kong, they cherry-picked some families and then he had a warm and fuzzy visit. You know, we don't want that. We had the umbrella movement just 2 years ago. How can we let the paramount leader know how Hong Kongers feel? Thank you very much.
I don't think you can do anything, because you know the rioters, in fact, plan to host a number of activities in May, celebrating the 50th anniversary of the event. They plan to show 2 films and organize a seminar on this event. But then they were told by the Central Liaison Office not to hold any activities before July 1st. And immediately they take order and they postpone all the activities after July 1st. So in such a case, you see the rioters themselves, who are so eager, adamant at reversing the verdict on them, they still prefer to take order from Beijing. And I don't think they are going to affect, to do anything before July 1st. As for the society at large, I think the police will make sure that nothing will be there to embarrass the president coming to Hong Kong. So I think it's hard. I mean, unless the civil society itself, people like you and the other activist groups would hold seminars, otherwise I don't think we can do anything. I mean, it's good that Connie has produced this documentary and is showing around the city. This is the way, the only way we can do.
Thank you very much. We've reached 2 o'clock, so I would just ask you to thank you so much, our 2 speakers, and see you at the next events.
Thank you very much.